To another of our headline stories this hour. It's just a couple of days now left before the start of the Rio Olympics. And it's still not known which athletes can compete for Russia. The final verdict is expected to be announced just hours before the opening ceremony on Friday. While yesterday, the Olympic chief defended the decision not to issue a ban on the entire squad.
This blanket ban has been called by some the nuclear option. And the innocent athletes would have to be considered as collateral damage. The result is death and devastation. This is not what the Olympic movement stands for.
As this meeting was taking place, the final group of Russian athletes were arriving in Rio. Ilya Petrenko is in Brazil with more on the athletes' emotional roller coaster ride following the doping scandal.
This is the Russian house, or Russia's fans' house, right by the Atlantic coast here in Rio, which is almost empty now, but inevitably is going to attract some dirty looks after all the doping scandal fuss. And we're bound to see more of it, even though only a couple of days are left before the Olympic flame is lit in Brazil. Usually in places like this, the fans get a chance to get together with the athletes. It's full of journalists. They can celebrate the gold medals or discuss failures. You see the guys are setting up a scene for big parties. The problem is that there is a chance that the Russian fans might not even meet anyone here at all. The International Olympic Committee has set a 48-hour deadline to announce their decision on every single member of the Russian team, whether they'll be allowed to compete in Rio or not, which means that more than 250 Russian athletes who have already arrived in Rio and are already practicing on Olympic venues still don't know their fate.
The results will be coming, within the next few days. They have to come within the next few days. It doesn't help you very much, I know, but I can't give you any details on numbers.
After months of uncertainty, 10 days ago, every clean member of the Russian team had a massive relief when the International Olympic Committee announced that they won't go for a blanket ban. But now uncertainty is back in the minds of the Russian athletes. For those who I've managed to speak to, they say it's unclear how politics has suddenly become more important than sports, even though it should be the other way around. The atmosphere here is very tense, and the air at the Russian house is suddenly filled with stress instead of that magic anticipation vibe.
Italy's former Olympic chief told Tuesday's IOC session, meanwhile, that international politics is using sport for its own ends. He added that lessons of the past should not be forgotten, referring to the boycott of the Moscow Olympics in 1980. We spoke with former American long-distance runner Gary Finelli, who was one of those prevented from competing back then for political reasons.
1980, but out of the blue, when there was a boycott declared, me and my other American athletes, we felt that we were robbed. We took years and years of training and sacrifice. I was floored. I was flabbergasted. I was just shocked. I was very saddened, very disheartened. We had our Olympic trials still, and I wore a shirt there. My shirt says, "The road to Moscow ends here." So yeah, I protested. I was the only marathoner to have a protest shirt on or to protest the Olympic boycott. Politics shouldn't enter the Olympics. It's a shame. It goes against the origins of the modern-day Olympics. There's a time to lay down arms and be peaceful and just celebrate the faster, higher, stronger ideal.
And over in the Paralympic camp, it's still not yet clear whether Russia will be allowed to take part in the Games, which start in September. Sports chiefs are mulling a blanket ban on the team due to doping. They will hear the case from the Russian delegation later on Wednesday. With more, here's Anastasia Churkina.
All of this follows the huge scandal following the release by the World Anti-Doping Agency of the McLaren report that really painted a very horrifying picture accusing Russia of using illegal substances. There's a scenario of so-called 35 unnamed Paralympians, which the names of whom are only known to the World Anti-Doping Agency and the International Paralympics Committee. Russia does not yet know who these athletes in question are. Even more so, they're saying that they don't even know whether or not this involves summer sports specifically. And so these 35 unnamed participants are really what hangs over the future of the rest of the Paralympic team. We've been hearing from medics saying that there are quite serious specifics that make it different for Paralympic athletes.
Each Paralympic athlete has a personal disability, and this disability has certain treatment standards. All medicine used in these standards is considered legal. If it isn't, but it's still needed for treatment, the athlete needs to get permission to use it. The issue is when an emergency happens and an athlete needs some other medicine, but doesn't have much time. They still need to fill a request naming all the drugs being used and send it to the International Sport Federation to be allowed to participate.
Of course, we have to keep in mind that at the London Summer Olympics, the Russian Paralympic team came in second in terms of the medal count, so they did very well. And now, of course, all of these athletes have been training very hard to participate again in Rio. And we've been hearing most of them, the ones who are clean, speaking out in support, of course, of the whole Russian Paralympic team, saying that any kind of ban on their participation would be a slap in the face.
They say sport is above politics. But as we can see, the situation is certainly politicized. In our Paralympic team, there are many strong athletes. There are many athletes that we know that if they go to the Games, they will most likely come back with gold medals. It's terrible even to imagine. I'm a Paralympic athlete myself. When you have been preparing for it your whole life, you've been working towards this step by step since childhood, and suddenly you're told officials may decide that you don't go?
Well, of course, if the International Paralympics Committee decides to ban the Russian Paralympic team, it's going to be an unprecedented sanction in terms of sports-disabled athletes' history. And we'll be here in Bonn waiting to see what comes out of the meeting later in the day, and we'll bring you all the latest.
A priest feels the wrath of riot police in a Paris church. Find out why after this short break.